Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Revamped. This time as a special additional episode to our Season 2 wrap-up entitled Souls, Stakes, and Self-Growth, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 2 character development discussion. This time we're giving the character arcs their own moment to shine. Instead of squeezing this into our usual season wrap-up, we made it a standalone episode, because our main characters and the important side characters deserve a closer look. We're talking about how they grew, the choices they made, how their stories connected, and what that meant for their relationships and for the group as a whole in Season 2. So let's get into it. Let's move into our most dragged out version of this, and hopefully we can get through it really quickly on our own behalf. But character development discussion. I wrote a note to on the spot ask you who was your favorite character this season just overall, but I'm assuming that is now Willow.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. And we've already kind of in a way covered why, so I don't really have to do that because you've displayed that naturally. I was like thinking that, I was like, well, that takes away from me to ask her later, but also I'm glad you had already said it. I just wanted to know from somebody that's watching the show through on their first time, coming from season 1, you were very much like a Giles girly, and now it seems like you're shifting, like still really liking Giles. He's like your second up, but it's like Willow's kind of taking his first place position.
For sure.
That.
Yeah.
All right, our first character, obviously our main character title role and character development has to come from Buffy herself. At the beginning of the season, we remember Buffy was still dealing with her death and the events of season 1. She arrived tougher, more guarded, and hiding her trauma through reckless behavior and a sharper edge to her attitude. And this alone set the tone for the season. And then when we see her, she's still obviously dealing with trying to have the normalcy as a teenage girl versus her Slayer duty, with a bit of decrease in the early start of the season, because I remember us speaking on how, like, up to Inca Mummy Girl, she seemed to be good with her responsibility, because she was like, I'll not go to the dance and stay out of this and just tell them I can't make it. She wasn't making a big fit like she did Never Kill a Boy on the First Date or things like that. She really traded in that night out for a night of duty and didn't have any of that. And then obviously by Reptile Boy, that normalcy aspect begins to creep back in, and she wants to explore that a bit more. She wants to not feel the pressure that Giles and Angel and her mom and everybody's like basically putting on her. We see that channel into merging with Angel in Halloween right after, because she wants to be someone else in her costume aside from actually becoming someone else with Ethan's spell. She wants to impress Angel, and she's like, well, let me dress up what he would have liked back then. And finds out, you know, as a blind side of that's not the type of women he actually craves. He wants excitement. By the time she deals with the events of 𝙬𝙗 with Ford, we are back in a stronger seat with Buffy, who is the Slayer, protector of the people, and the energy she displayed for the people in that room was very much like the choice she made in becoming Part 2, without the same devastation. But she sacrificed someone she loved for others, and that to me is like one of the bigger moments where we started to see big changes on Buffy's behalf and her duty, giving us a peek into what was to come. Now, obviously, in 𝙬𝙗, things also changed course with her admitting that she loved Angel as well, and that is pushed off for a bit during the Dark Age, where Giles is on his bender, and she has to step up and take charge once again, basically given delegated orders for everybody. So she's really having to be in the position of working for herself, which is also a foreshadow for the end. Falling right into Part 1 and Part 2 of What's My Line, she's a target and dealing with Spike in a more significant way, along with the threat of Drusilla rising to power again. But then she also meets Kendra along this journey, and you can see why these episodes are crucial to the main story arc and her development of the season. I feel like she's at a tug of war that episode with Kendra there and the dual sides of the Slayer. We also see dual sides of Buffy, the one where she's trying to save Angel but also needing to stop the bad guys, and of course Buffy seeing that as a wrapped up event and doing one inevitably secures the other. But she seems a bit semi-reckless to me within this little bit of a 2-episode arc in the decision making, and being at war with Kendra in a sense over which one should come first, because technically they should be dishing out on Spike and not just like worrying about saving Angel. Like I said, she got 2 birds with 1 stone, and it worked out for her, but it's whatever. And it mirrors the internal perspective of which comes first for Buffy, her life as a girl or her job as the Slayer, because that was what she thought it was at that. And the end of that, obviously, she learns a lot from Kendra and doesn't feel as alone in her role, but also is taught to understand something more about herself. But also by the end of these episodes, we see her care and intimacy for Angel increasing, and that sails us right into them going for it, ignoring responsibility that she needs to carry across Ted and Bad Eggs, culminating in the loss of her innocence. She crosses the line from teenage passion to adult consequence when Angel is stripped away from her and they have sex, something I think that they would have made typically feel normal, but there is no normal in Sunnydale or for her life. And in that, I feel like she's forced to grow up really fast, because the rest of the season is all about her. Like, the whole show is about her growing up, and this stretch right here is like the tailspin to it. Like, she has to like do it now. You know what I mean? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And obviously when Angela starts attacking her group and coming for her people, that adds a whole other layer of problems for her. And she was emotionally wrecked while trying to deal with this. And that's why she had to get in line real quick to figure out what's important now. Angel was gone, so she didn't have the distraction of him anymore as far as a love interest was concerned. And she didn't have the distraction she had in like bad eggs and stuff. So we already see a Buffy that has to step into more of her role again and away from normalcy, which is, again, another thing that we've been trying to deal with her. She's always trying to find out like some way to still be herself and not get lost in this, like Kendra. This is where the rest of the season essentially shifts for Buffy into the focus of her coming of age story, aka Becoming. The deaths occurring provided the seriousness for her to get in line with her duty, and by the time we reach Becoming is a completely changed and almost unrecognizable version of the girl that we started the season with, and technically the series with. For me, this season shaped Buffy's development that we will see progress into the future of the series. But by the end of the season, I feel like with her being alienated from her mother, forced to run away from home, and burdened with the guilt of having killed Angel to save the world, Buffy learns that strength doesn't mean defeating monsters or facing unbearable cost of loving and losing. That being the Slayer actually does mean sacrifice, because that's the lesson that she's been having to learn from Giles without him saying physically sacrifice. You know, her character development is all about learning what it is to be the Slayer, because that's all that she's got. You can't have a normal life at this point. And then obviously the events of the finale put Buffy in an isolated role where she is feeling like that she's all she's got now, which in a way is where Kendra was in her mindset as the Slayer. But from what we can tell by the close of the season, Buffy is choosing to walk away from her calling because of all that she's faced, even though she's emerged wiser as a young adult and woman who knows the true strength means living with impossible choice and sacrifice. It will be interesting, I think, to see where she is when we meet back up with her in season 3 to essentially deal with the aftermath of this versus the way we did last season. I know that's so long-winded and I'm so sorry for everybody and yourself, but like that's the best way I could, and I only really did that for Buffy. Nobody else's is like that. It's like she's special in a way, and I was like, I feel like I have to tell her story to really get out the way my mind plays it as how it breaks down of what happens to her versus me throwing out some keywords and saying like this. It's basically like me reading out every episode for the season in a little quick context, but like it gets across how I see the development of her, where she starts from the beginning of the season to the end, and every milestone she has to hit, and like what's going on for her and what the big message is that keeps coming up for her.
Yeah. I agree. And I feel like you did do honor her properly, because you have to. You kind of have to revisit the whole journey that she's been on from the very beginning, because 22 episodes is a lot and 5 months is a long time to be going over so much stuff. It's almost easy to forget where she actually came from. Not that we lose sight of like who she was in season 1, but so much has happened here in season 2, and I feel like she went from just struggling to balance normal teen life with being the Slayer, and us having to just watch that journey and realizing how hard it is. But then to come back from season 1 and see how impacted she is still from her own brief death and from having to take on the Master, and how heavy it's really becoming visibly to step into her role and carry that weight around constantly, was way more eye-opening in season 2 than it was in season 1, and I feel like season 1 did a good job kind of placing us there, but season 2 did a good job like beating that dead horse. You know what I mean? Because we know that her life is not easy, but to constantly throw her in a position that gets more and more and more difficult each time her challenge is increased in weight and in depth and an emotional like attachment to it, like she's constantly having to sacrifice something. So for it to all end in a way where she's sacrificing, I feel like this season just did a really good job adding that extra weight to what's already difficult about her life. And I think that she learns even more about being the Slayer, and that really meaning that it will never come without like sacrifice, and it'll never come with any solitude, or it'll always be filled and riddled with painful choices. And odds are the more she goes on this journey, the more painful those choices are going to be. So it's like it's disheartening almost, and it makes you sad for her because she has to constantly bear this weight, but you always get the other side of the coin with her where you understand that the other side means that she's stronger than anyone.
Yeah.
And that doesn't just mean physically, but now it also means emotionally because she's always in this corner of, I have nothing left to lose. And when you're dealing with someone like that and you couple that emotional resiliency with her physical strength, that comes with being the Slayer organically, it just makes her seem like the most unstoppable force.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the vibe you leave with at the end of season 2, where it's like you knew she was a Slayer at the end of season 1, and now she's unstoppable at the end of season 2, and it's only season 2, so you're just like, what the fuck wild shit are we about to get into?
Yeah. Her life doesn't get any easier. Like, truly, this
No.
burden just keeps on growing as she
Yes.
develops more years as the fucking chosen one. And then we can move on to Giles, obviously. What do you feel about Giles for his development this season? I'll let you take the reins on Daddy Giles since he's one of your mans. Or your
So so for Giles, I feel like we started things off in this very classic watcher role where he was more rule bound and very almost reserved because we didn't have this exposure with Jenny, so we didn't get to see this side of Giles right away that's more soft and has this emotional need for love and intimacy, and there's just a sweet side to Giles. Not that you ever really anticipated anything less, but he was more, like I said, emotionally reserved, very just about the rules and regulations, and wanted Buffy to take her role seriously, and it almost seemed like as much as he had his role as the Watcher, a lot of his identity came from that in season 1, whereas this one, he becomes more of a father figure, I think, to Buffy than just this sideline watcher. And I think that having that emotional connection between them evolve and watch it become so fatherly almost makes it more special that he's her watcher, and you really get to understand how important his role is, not just in her life but in her duty as a Slayer, and how important it is not just that she has a watcher but someone who's going to take her seriously and understand where she's coming from and understand both parts of her life because he's exposed to them directly. He kind of has to walk this very careful middle line, or middle of the road, where he has to be a guardian in a way, but he has to fulfill his own duty also as her watcher. So he kind of has to push her in the ring even on the days where she doesn't want to fight.
Mm-hmm.
So to see him have that conflict within himself was huge too, because you don't just see him be so regulated or be so about this is how it has to be. You see him soften up to her personal
Yeah,
life
she
and
rubs off on him a little bit, I feel like. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And so to watch his character on top of that falling in love with someone, so you just get exposed to this really vulnerable part of Giles, is what it feels like. It makes you feel closer to his character. You get to know him better. And it does contribute a lot to everyone's dynamic, I think, in the group with him. I think it establishes more trust between the group and Giles. Everyone's able to take each other more seriously, which in these case scenarios are it's a huge thing to have, where you're not constantly arguing with everyone in the room, and you do know that there's a voice of reason, and that voice of reason usually is Giles. So, and you notice that in the episodes where he has to be absent.
Yeah.
It's suddenly Buffy's a lost puppy dog and she's just seeking Giles's guidance. And
Well, name
so I
has
like
Sunshine, the lost puppy.
but I just love that they made it very clear that Giles is not a sideline character or a sideline watcher, or he's not just a person shoving or guiding in the right direction. He has his own very vital part in this group as the voice of reason most of the time. And so when he's missing, you definitely know it. And I don't think we noticed that as much before in season 1, where it's now it's clear that as her watcher and as this fatherly figure, there's a different type of weight that his character carries too that wasn't there in season 1, at least not for me.
Yeah. My first statement that I made, it says Rupert Giles. He shows us that beneath the tweed and the musty books lies a man who's anything but boring. We come to find out he's a man with a past, with regrets, and a darkness he tries to keep buried. I'll
Mm-hmm.
get it. Like, that was like the best way to sum up like Giles this whole entire season. And
Totally.
like, I can knock off like every single thing that you said as far as like that goes. But obviously, we got to see Giles grow with Ginny a little bit more and then lose her. And we all know that story and how that happened. And we kind of like nailed dynamic with Buffy in that as well, which I kind of want to like try to wrap up in the while we talk about each character going through too, so we don't have to do a whole different section for that. But Giles has that whole backstory be revealed with Heath and Rain, and because Buffy finds out all that stuff in the Dark Age, I think that's what leads him to becoming more vulnerable with her and sharing his bonded experience through the day-to-day work, because, you know, we haven't gotten to see other relationships between Watchers and Slayers, but with past ones, you would assume that most of the stuffy white men that are run by the council, like that issue out these watchers for the chosen one, like Mr. Zabuto, he's obviously got Kendra trained since she was a kid. So like she's
Mm-hmm.
very structured in that way. And pretty much that's the mindset, without being spoiler, throughout the patriarchy, the misogynistic lead of the council run by the Great Brits or whatever, the UK people, like that's where they are. They're from London. That's where Giles is from. We know he's from England, whatever. But like all of that, like Buffy gets such a different element with Giles, and because of the situations they've gotten into and because of the attitude that Buffy pulls on, it obviously changes Giles so much. So we do see the melding of the two energies coming off of season one, where he was more structured and strict with her, where he understands her differently this season and does try to allot wiggle room, but doesn't always have to give it. I will say that I wrote too that Giles stands as one of the show's most layered characters. He's a man who's done terrible things. He's loved deeply, lost terribly, and still chooses every day to stand beside Buffy and to carry the burden with her. And he mirrors
Mm-hmm.
Buffy in a way that the others cannot. So that's Giles
Exactly.
in a nutshell to me. For me, the father figure stuff, I'm noticing this time watch around, because obviously you're catching up on this theme and picking up on it. Giles really became Buffy's dad when she lost Angel. His quote at the end of Innocence, whenever he's like, "I don't believe this is your fault." He's like, "Do you want me to wag my finger at you until you acted rashly?" He's like, "You did, and I can, but I know that you loved him, and he's proven for you, like showing the understanding that he loved you also." So telling her that she's not to blame for that, and that he is giving her the support that she needs and respect in this moment, is to me what gave him, he's not just her watcher vibes watching through this time. I already know like the rest of the way it plays out and what Giles is to Buffy. Obviously that grows, and you're already seeing those good healthy dad vibes where she doesn't have that from her real dad. So this is her replacement father, and that's why I think the whole dynamic is on the sidelines with Hank. You know what I mean? With the concept of Buffy moving there with just her mom and stuff like that too. Giles is like the stand-in dad being her watcher role as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all that. Let's move on to your favorite new character, Willow. Willow, fucking crazy. Do you want to talk about her first, since she's your baby Z's?
Sure. Surprisingly, I didn't write a lot about
Me
Willow.
neither.
But yeah, obviously seeing her go from like this kind of Xander obsessive, shy, bookish version of herself in season one to finding full on confidence and beginning a healthy mutual relationship with Oz and having more depth there and just tapping into this whole other side of her by the end. It just feels so culminating for her character, and like, I don't know, I feel like we're really getting somewhere with Willow, you know, in a way that I didn't see coming, because I always felt like Willow was always going to be so easily pushed to the background and kind of there as maybe a secondary voice of reasoning, or as the person who hacks everything, or that kind of role, more of like a resourceful fixture in the group.
Mm-hmm.
So to have, like you said about Giles being very layered, that's kind of how I feel about Willow too, is she's getting more and more layered as time goes on. And I feel like she just really, really starts stepping into her own in so many ways, you know, like into her own power, into her own personality, into her own way of being. I feel like she's really starting to figure out what her identity is in a way, you
Absolutely,
know,
yeah.
and really accepting what that means, regardless of anything. Because I think being Buffy's friend and acknowledging the Hellmouth and all the things that are happening, how does it not make you okay with everything about who you are, especially like the things that potentially could scare you the most. So to see Willow confront herself and eagerly almost approach the things that she feels pulled toward is amazing to watch, because she came from this scared little corner, and to really just watch her come out of that like full force has been awesome to see. And I feel like as far as characters are concerned, she's taken like leaps and bounds, in comparison to all of them, as far as how much she's truly changed, and which is maybe why she's my favorite.
Honestly, like most of what you've hit on is like I was reading as you were basically saying, and you were almost in sync with what I like had written out in some ways about Willow, but some stuff that you didn't touch on in the same way. The fact that you obviously, I can agree with you on the and I can agree with you on all parts, but the stronger, more in tune version of herself, the sense of identity that she got, is the overall big thing for Willow this season, because I wrote down a lot in my notes about how she grew her backbone, and she got this new dynamic with Oz that was able to, in a way, really kind of help her fully let go. She did have those moments. Obviously, she wants to see Xander naked still, because we learned that in Go Fish. She has that whole problem with him in Innocence, where she sees him and Cordelia kiss, but all that provides the real context for Willow that she needs to move on from this. And it's a lesson that she's learned from the beginning. It's breadcrumbed for her that Xander might still be a possibility at the beginning of the season, when she almost kisses him with the ice cream and all that in the first episode. And then we cycle into how she feels about him and Inca Mummy Girl. You've seen him branch off to his first girl that's not Buffy and all that. So up until she has to like basically see him with Cordelia, it's an illusion in her mind that she can, she's Delulu, that she might have Xander. And then thankfully Oz finally steps in and shows her what kind of person she should be treated as, you know what I mean? What kind of woman she should be treated with, like what kind of respect she should be treated with is what I meant to say. But all of that. And those are big key points. But also the other thing I want to touch base on that you didn't necessarily cover is losing Jenny seemed to shift Willow a bit also, because obviously Jenny is putting her in the role of the teacher. And then she also assumed her position after that death. So we get to see Willow, who enjoys being a mentor, but also someone who likes authority and power in a gentle way. Obviously with that, talking about her magical journey, Jenny's records on magics was what she left behind. And with her taking over, had she had not done that, Jenny was that catalyst for her. And we saw the open invitation that she's already like with behind the scenes before she says it to Buffy, like I went through her files and stuff. We learn in I Only Have Eyes for You that she's like willing to help bring magic to the table for them to rid the school of the ghosts and stuff like that, making everybody the magical sachets and things like that. It's her dipping her toes into that, and then like you said, making that choice at the end is just like pure gold for her to be like, okay, I'm going on this journey, I want to do this, I feel confident enough, I feel called to it. So it would be interesting to see where she goes from that. Obviously, like the whole season, as I said, though, is all about her building a stronger backbone to her character, and an emerging edge to her is what I called it in my notes, because obviously she's starting to wield real power, both magical and personal, and season 2 plants seeds of the more complex, powerful version of herself.
Totally. And I think one last thing I wanted to touch base on is I think it was good that not just did she have to be so exposed to Cordy and Xander's relationship, but I think the fact that she inevitably found out in a way that felt like a betrayal, like he was keeping something from her. I think it almost exposed her finally to who Xander can kind of be sometimes, instead of just painting him in this like, oh, you're my best friend, so I have this unconditional like love and image for you, like you just get slaps on the wrist for everything. I think now that his way of being and his character was kind of pointed more at her, and she felt an emotional consequence from that, also kind of made her step into herself differently, because she realized that even my own friends can betray me, or do something like that. So yeah.
All right, so rolling into Xander Harris, I'll go. I want to make this as simple as possible, because we spent forever in Prophecy Girl talking with those girls about Xander, and we talked about him a lot in Becoming Part 1 and Part 2, and I know I don't want to not deservingly give him any time, but I don't want to get frustrated. Good notes for Xander, like obviously he always provides comic relief, and he's a character that's very brave, and even though deeply flawed, he always is there to help fight. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
There's not one chance that he is not down to like help the cause, to sit in the library and do research. He might bitch a little bit about it, but he does it. He shows up as an extra hand in the fight, even if he's just going to get, as we see most episodes opening, he's hanging out with Buffy on patrol night, but he's already knocked out and unconscious on the ground while Buffy's slaying the vampire. So he shows
Yeah.
up, but like he has repeatedly showed me his flaws in the episode and in the way he's written. It's not just like character development for Xander 2 is how they've written him on the show, so it's not his fault. But as a character in the show and pretending we're in this world living with him, you know, he distrusts Angel so much and is so jealous over him that I just can't ever get over that type of stuff in these earlier seasons whenever he's very immature in his setting. And that's what we can chalk it up to at the end of the day. He's just very immature. He's a teenage boy that's half the time guided by hormones and impulse reactions. Like
Yes.
that's exactly what he's going off of. But
Yes.
in some context, obviously, he does get a little bit of the bigger picture because he's, once again, just like Willow, just like Cordelia and everybody is becoming a great influence off of like the influence that Buffy has on them. Being friends with her are giving all of these people that we started the show with each a bit of individualism and a cause and something worth like living for, something more active in the grander scheme of things. They didn't have to know about this magical world. They could have just been living their life or be dead in this town. So that being said, Xander's like Buffy's second hand when it comes to like fighting all the time. So I'm going to give him his credit too. But just like the hostility that he has over stuff and like the comments that he happens to make, you know, I feel like that's always something that's going to just peeve me about him. But the journey across the season, we do see in the middle a little bit of a Xander that has a more of a level head because in Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, he makes some really good judgment calls. You can tell it's a 50-50 when it comes to him on how he navigates the things that he's going through. And you can definitely tell which ones are fueled by his emotions and which ones are driven by his mind, you know? So,
Yes.
and that's something
Yeah.
that we didn't see last season. He was a lot more careless and just kind of like hopping into the fight. He wasn't really being the same way. It was more of this like obsession with
Mindful.
Buffy, but like this one, it was a different take on him. And there was a lot more opportunities to laugh at Xander this season. Like his character development, I think, is the one that out of everybody in this season weighs the lowest on the scale. Even Cordelia does better than him in the season, in my
I
opinion,
agree.
because like everything that she does for it, and we'll talk about her next, but his arc and his development is more for adding that thorn in Buffy's side whenever it comes
Yeah.
to like her having to hear things maybe she doesn't want to hear in certain contexts, or providing a perspective that not everybody always wants to hear, but it doesn't mean it doesn't have in some way, shape, or form validity. And we gave it to it our perspectives when we talked about the episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like a big thing that comes for Xander. And I think this season he's really learning like where he may or may not stand. And I think that sadly he's not learning the right way. And we're going to like bleed into season 3 with some of this energy of like childhood adolescence for Xander. He's having the hardest time growing up and having a level of maturity, I think, is where I see his development going. And like I've said in the past, as a big breadcrumb spoiler, season 5 Xander is pretty immaculate. You know, even a little bit of like later seasons, Xander, we've already all said that whenever we were recorded with you and guests have been here. Xander is one of those characters that does grow on you, and not even to play a pun on what you said in the first couple episodes, you were saying he was the character that was going to grow on you. He grows on you in the show, and everybody just doesn't have to like spit every time they say his name. To spit his
I get that, but I can totally see why, you know, and I feel like it's not that he's not necessarily growing on me still. I just, like you said, maybe he's just not growing in general as a character enough. Like for me, it was an overall feeling of like 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. You know, instead of 2 steps forward, 10 steps back, it was kind of like we were always like, "Ooh, we're getting somewhere." No, we're not. You know,
50-50.
that kind of vibe. So it was like this perfect mixture of like growth and being stagnant in his character development, because we saw other sides of him and we saw him, like you said, become more brave or become more willing to step in a fight with more intention and with more mindfulness intact, instead of having that impulsive like push or force behind him. He did make wiser choices and he did take smarter steps, I guess, instead of just like blindly going in. And he did come through with like valuable things from time to time, but it's like for every time those moments happen, there would be a backtrack of some sort where he would act misogynistic or he would act douchey or he would act emotionally impulsive in the wrong way. So it's hard to I guess I'm getting to a place where it's hard to take him as seriously as I feel like I should be able to this far into the seasons, because I felt like his stride, I guess, was greater in season one with his character development, whereas now it just kind of feels like we're still dealing with the same Xander from the beginning of season two to now. Like, it hasn't changed that much. So
Absolutely. And then we get the
yeah.
blur too, like of Cordelia being entered into the mix. I don't want to leave that out at all. And obviously that changes the dynamic and gives him something else to pay attention to. And
Hmm.
and that's great, but he's also paying attention to kind of everybody else still while he is dating this girl. But I do like the
Yeah.
development that we have between the two of them. Like, they're not just bickering and fighting like they are at the beginning of the season, and they have a rewrite in their history leading up to now, where Cordelia was just a bitch to Xander and Willow their whole life. You know what I mean? Like, as far as dynamics
Yes.
goes, that's one of our dynamics that we needed to discuss in this too. So I do think like Cordelia was a healthy and fun match, like you said earlier. Like, she really is the other
Hmm.
half of him. Like, they pair well, really well, as we discussed
Totally.
earlier. And then, like, to backtrack just a teeny bit into Willow, I want to just say that Willow is a great stand for Buffy always. Like, that's her best friend, and the fact that she did all that stuff, like the spell and all that
Yes.
other stuff as
It's
well,
very
are
ride or die.
dynamic. Like, obviously, like we talked a little bit naturally between her and Xander, their dynamic for that. But I wanted to just make that
Hmm.
mention and note that she is going to come through for Buffy and always help to find a way as like Buffy's literal hand of spirit, you know? So
Yeah.
anything else about Xander?
No, let's move on to Cordelia.
I like how you just transitioned us.
I hope that's what's next on your
I
list.
know, right? Cordelia is next on the list.
Okay, good.
Cordelia isn't somebody that we got like a crazy shift from in the bigger storyline of things, but we do have a big shift from the way she acted in season one to season two, because obviously season two is all about her actually being a member of the Scooby Gang.
Yeah.
She has that transformation from shallow queen bee to an unexpectedly loyal and valuable member of that gang. And you know, where she existed mostly on the edges and sharp tongued, like playing that popular girl role, she found herself, I feel like in that season and early on, a little bit more the girl in peril or the damsel in distress. But in season two, she starts to become like comic relief instead of the damsel in distress. She's like that second up to Xander, where she's like saying something funny to give us like the laugh that we need. Because we're usually in season one, we were only really getting that. We get that from everybody because they write really well. But Xander had most of those key points to like bring back
Hmm.
focus and be like, oh yeah, remember to laugh or breathe a little bit right here. And she's still very much Cordelia. She's still blunt, she's still self-centered, and she's still ruthlessly honest.
Yeah.
She says what everyone else is too polite to admit. She doesn't have tact. But being repeatedly thrown into the life or death battles, I think alongside Buffy, she just starts to open up and become a bit braver than she expected of herself. And by the time we reach like the Dark Age, obviously she's in the thick of it with the gang after that, because she shows up to help get Jenny out of the body. She's there, and then after every fight, she's there to help fight the bug man and all of this, even though she's bickering with Xander and opening up the relationship there in that way. Like, she's there in the thick of it. That's the best way I can put it. And
Hmm.
that's coming off of a lot. Just for a few episodes before that in Reptile Boy, she was like, at the end of that, I hate you guys. I just hate you guys. Like, you wouldn't think she would, like, she's, you know what I mean? She was in the library talking about why every sentence got dead people in it that comes out y'all's mouths. Like, comments like that.
Hmm.
She stopped making those comments, and she's like, I'm just going to be here for that. And
Yeah.
obviously, we get a surprise in the relationship with Xander. On paper, they're opposites, like we've been saying. She's popular, privileged. He's goofy and broke, but their bickering chemistry kind of helps turn into a real attraction. And then we never lose that in their relationship, which is fun to play on, because they're the only relationship that they're like the opposite of Angel and Buffy, because they're the funner version. Like, they just
100%.
get to kind of like date and be wacky and woo, like all of that happens. And then dating Xander helps cost Cordelia this season her social status and cool girl image, but in her own accord. She's like giving up at the end of it and be like, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to tell these bitches off and be like, I'm still that bitch, but I'm also going to do what I want. And if y'all still want to hang out with me, I'm actually still the cool girl. Y'all were only cool because of me half the time. Like,
Yeah.
Harmony, you try too hard. You know what I mean? Her telling off Harmony, mwah, like beautiful, like love all of that.
Hmm.
But I think it's really interesting with the callback speech to her in Buffy and Out of Mind, Out of Sight. This season, she's choosing to surround herself with people that actually see her. Whereas last season, she was talking about, I could be surrounded by a bunch of people and nobody actually hears what I said, or like, I'm like, you know, completely alone
100%.
feeling and all of that. She
Yeah.
doesn't feel that way anymore. And I feel like this season also proved that she can be in the fight, stand up for herself, and care deeply for what people once may have mocked about her. Besides her blunt materialism, like, all of that, like being loyal to her gang, even though she's a bitch half the time and brave, willing to risk everything too to be a part of this, is something that we thought that she would just easily dismiss going into the season, and especially where we come off last season, because we saw they offered for her to go hang out with them for lunch and she turned it down. But then this season she comes back around, so I like that. And then the last thing I really want to say about her is obviously about the end of season 2. Cordelia has earned her place within the Scooby Gang, not by changing who she is, but showing that her sharp edges have fierce heart. And I feel like that Cordelia has depth, courage, and a good heart under the designer outfits and sharp tongue. And then also this season specifically foreshadows how important she'll become in the Buffyverse as well. And that's a breadcrumb for you, but that's also everybody else will kind of understand that, because season 2, like, we get a different Cordelia in season 3, and I'll be quite honest, and I'm trying not to spoil anything really for you, but like, they didn't write her too well into it, like, that season. Like, she's got, like, she kind of falls short in some ways,
so
like
sad.
yeah, and
I see.
You'll understand that very early on, but that's where we'll go there. But
for Cordy, I feel like we started things off in a super typical place with her with season 2, where she was more like vain and shallow and sarcastic, and like you said, had almost that like mean girls, slightly privileged bully energy or something. And then we go from that to her being in a secret relationship with Xander and fighting alongside the Scoobies, and then just evolving into this different space completely than she was in season 1. And not that her character, I feel like, made as many strides as like Willow's did, but I feel like to watch her step into having this desire to be a fixture in the group and to fight alongside them really showcased her own courage and loyalty to them, and made them okay with being, or with her being around and having open arms and not needing to keep her at arm's length. And I feel like she just slowly trades her popularity for authenticity, and she was almost forced to kind of shy away from her own authentic self because she felt like she had this thing to uphold, and even that wasn't really who she is. And I think we're just starting to see that, because it's so easy to assume that Cordelia thrives in the space of being like the popular girl, but I feel like we're starting to see that was more of a role that she felt like she needed to step into, so it almost makes her more relative to Buffy, where the roles are nowhere nearly the same, or they don't even carry like the same weight or responsibility. But to see that it's just a high school kid's journey, especially for a girl, to step into a role that usually does not mirror your identity, is also just a huge mirroring on like a high school experience. And I feel like having Cordelia and Xander in a way, and even their secret relationship that comes up in the season, is such a huge play on how we really feel so many different emotions going through high school. And I always credit the show for being so good at that, because it's so far removed from reality. That like to tie these key parts and that make you feel like things that you probably felt when you had those chapters in life is really just like top notch. And I feel like Cordelia, without a character like Cordelia and developing into this more authentic corner, the show would be kind of missing something, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I love Cordy. That's why, like, we always say that she has the layers of the onion, like she's our biggest blooming, so that's why I feel like I had a lot more to say about her, like in big context, because she's got some good character development in those kind of ways, like just coming off from season 1 and 2, and now we can know this is the Cordelia like that she was meant to be versus that superficial one.
Yes, agreed.
All right, Angel/Angelus. Yeah, I know, right? His arc obviously explores themes of duality, redemption, and the darkness lurking within us all. That's basically his metaphor for the season as well, but it makes season 2 one of Buffy's most emotionally complex and unforgettable chapters, and that's why it's a big part of my favorite season. And Angel is one of my favorite characters too. I think it's easy to say that a show called Buffy, the main point of this season, also expressed a lot of interest in Angel, and with him taking the lead as the big bad was a really big pivotal thing for the series and for the season. His character development was immensely different than his in season 1. We get more from anyone other than Buffy with Angel in his story arc, especially like across the show. Like he's the only other person that's super fleshed out that we get a lot of backstory from. We learn a lot from Buffy day by day and like episode by episode because we're always immersed in her story. But it's like because Angel is her lover and her counterpart in a way, we also get the extended invitation to learn a lot more about Angel because of that. That's why I was like, it's a show called Buffy. It might as well also be called Angel in that way, which makes sense also why Angel gets his own spinoff. He's a very important role in the series. Like he's a crazy character in a good way and a bad way. We get both sides. In the first half we get the like Angel that's chill and, you know, growing with Buffy, holding boundaries and all of that as well. And then in What's My Line, obviously we get the role that he is opposite within the season because he kind of becomes the damsel for the first time and he needs to be saved. And also the fact that we flesh out his role, you know, between Lie to Me and What's My Line, where we have him being the cure for Drusilla. We find out about him being her sire in general and him basically having this whole, I don't know, the follow up to what Giles said about him in season 1, where he's like, he was one of the most ruthless vampires. We learn exactly kind of how throughout this season. So we learn more of the layers to him within it. And then obviously the point of view of his actual past, we get to see what made him and an inside look to like what becoming means by the end of the show. Like I just said, becoming is also like, I could have made a whole separate video on Instagram to post, maybe a reel for Angel. I didn't want to take the time for it. You know what I'm saying? The story for like season 2 is both about Angel and Buffy becoming.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about his shift, the character he's playing, David Boreanaz wise, having that huge shift from Angel to Angelus. Angelus is just more about chaos, mayhem, and, you know, scary vibes. He likes to toy with people. And when he first comes out, he teams up with the Judge and Spike and Drew to bring forth the possible into humanity. And I think it's an interesting foreshadow for Angelus's arc to the point of the end of the season, where he's also trying to raise a Cathla to have the altered version of what Buffy stopped him from doing in that episode. You know, I noticed that. Yeah. So like something about Angelus, he's like, fuck it, I'm about to turn the whole world upside down kind of shit, versus like Spike and everybody else is just like, let's kill a bunch of people or orchestrate to kill the Slayer or do this and still have our Happy Meals with legs running around or whatever. Angelus took like a whole other foot in that zone. And obviously he targeted the fuck out of Buffy. And a big part of Angelus's character development, because Angel's gone halfway season through and we're more dealing with him, is like that he's still so obsessed with Buffy over the course of it. It's almost like he still loves her, like, but Angelus would never admit that. You know what I mean? Like,
it's like he doesn't know how to love, so the only way it can like come through is this
psychoism way.
Yeah. Yes.
So 100%. But you know, that's pretty much like where I know we talked about so much obviously in becoming part 2 for Angel and his story. So like I'm not going to beat a dead horse there, but like I said, learning a lot about what he's capable of like leads to the suspicion of, now that he's really ensouled again, if he was to ever technically lose his soul again, like where is he gonna pick up? Is he gonna be big destruction dude again, or like, you know what I mean? Not to say that that does or doesn't happen, but like that is a possibility if he ever like were to sleep with Buffy again, or something else like caused him to lose his soul, some demon decided to suck it out of him. Like we got a problem.
He can't even risk happiness. So, like don't even risk it
this season. Risk it for the biscuit, the vicious biscuit. Where I'll be going for breakfast tomorrow. I'm just kidding.
Yum, delish.
But no, like this really explores what he's capable of, and it leaves us on this like crazy cliffhanger. And we're like, by the end of it, thank God we got Angel back, even though he's been sent to a hell dimension. You know, that's the suckiest part for the ending of his character development, is one, we don't know right now. And then two, the fact that like he just woke up out of this like dream state and now he's in hell and he's like probably being tortured or like insufferable, or, you know, hell's not a fun place or any hell dimension in that way. It just doesn't scream like, ooh, puppies, since we're on the puppies trope.
It's not giving positive vibes.
It's not giving sunshine.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that like I just want to touch base not even so much on the character development, but the fact that the actor is so top tier, in the fact that we don't see Angelus coming, but once he's there, it is literally like an entire different entity has taken this man over. And it shows even more in the last part of Becoming Part 2 because of the fact that he instantly has to make that switch, you know, just like a light switch, because he goes back to having his soul like in the matter of an instant. And to see how fleeting it is, obviously, because then everything has to end, is like the saddest fucking part. But it also drives it home completely because, again, the actor is so damn good that he can make you hate him and love him again in the same second. And it's just such a vast change in character. You know, it's like we can't almost speak on his character development because he turned into an actual different character
Yeah, his
completely.
development was the most.
So it's almost unfair in a way. But yeah, I just wanted to speak on his acting because I've never seen someone, the same person, actually be able to embody two different versions of someone so excellently that they almost physically like look different just by the facial gestures that they're making, you know, or the intensity that they're deciding to like hone in on, or the mood or whatever it is, you know. It's like, it's great.
Jenny Calendar is our next one up because I have no more to say about Angel. I'll talk about him in the future. We're not done with him yet.
Oh, so
But,
sad.
you know, Jenny, I feel like is a really easy one to kind of get through because she didn't have the most development on the show. You know, we
Yes.
learned of her in the beginning of the series as just being like that grounded, cool, knowledgeable Scooby Gang member, techno pagan with all her little magical stuff that she can do. But she's mostly just there as less of a hand and more as like a person for Giles, you know. And even especially
Yeah.
in this season, she's like the person that what he's doing on his sidelines when he's not dealing with Buffy and stuff. That's his angel in a way, in a sense. And a lot of it's flirtatious in the beginning, and then it eventually unfolds, and then obviously we get the tragedy with Jenny and all that too. But
Yeah.
you know, if we have to speak for her development, the fact that they even gave her the storyline of being Yana initially and being part of the tribe that like actually cursed Angel, just put her be a big part of Jealous's and Angel's
Yes.
story. So
Yeah.
for character dynamics, I actually could technically put Jenny and him together in a like little dynamic because they are interweave themselves from the past. You know what I mean? Like in some
Yeah.
way their fate's still aligned, and hers aligned with Buffy in that way. And
They're rooted in each
and
other
then it
somehow.
caused like the flip side of it because Jenny's character development is about like her having a change of heart halfway through that and being like, oh my God, I care for this man and these people. So like, I'm going to actually not report back like I'm technically supposed to. I'm going to look the other way and also still keep guard. But obviously, like in the beginning, she's not seeing anything that's like she should be technically worried about. But she's also not really making sure that Angel is suffering. She knows that Angel's having a good time, like fighting vampires with people and being a force of good, but she's also seeing that flip side of things that, oh wait, hold up, this thing that y'all call us so evil actually has a soul now that y'all gave him, that y'all didn't expect him to just be burdened all the time. He's making use of it. So he technically deserves a sense of redemption and gets that from Jenny and her development with him. Like the way she portrays and sees the way he's portrayed, like from her villagers and then obviously her family and all that, all the way into like how her mindset shapes over him. So that's just huge that way too. And then like I was saying, the emotional depth she gets with Giles all the way up to like him killing her and that being forever between like Giles and Jenny's dynamic. Like he has to know that he's lost yet another friend and family member in his lifetime, because he says that in the Dark Age. And like even in this episode, or I say this episode because it's talking about Jenny and we think passion when you think Jenny, at the end he's like, I buried a lot of people, but Jenny's really the first one that I've loved. So I mean, we know that Giles has experienced a lot of loss. He's lost friends. We learned that in the Dark Age, like all of that. Almost lost Jenny that episode. So it was technically like a little foreshadow moment that we might lose Jenny in some way, and Giles might have to deal with like her in that way. When you really think about
these
it,
emotions.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, but obviously too, Jenny's death is just the pivotal moment that underlines the high stakes of the fight against evil. Like you were saying that no one is safe. It really secured that. And like, I feel like her legacy will live on in the group's like strength and resolve and Giles' renewed commitment to protecting Buffy and the others because of the fact that somebody so important lost. So that was a big character development that she helped extend outward to the gang and like left that behind for them in the way going forward, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe be on cue a little bit. Don't leave people too long when there's psycho boyfriends running around.
Oh, God, so terrible. Yeah, I think the only thing outside of all the things that you touched base on already that I have jotted down is that by the end of it, it seems like she represents themes of forgiveness, trust, and loss. And her death kind of marks this point where the season darkens like significantly, you know. And like we both said, there's just this very clear message that nothing is predictable and nothing is safe at all. Like all the things are on the table, basically. Like, all bets are off. Anything's game. We don't know what the fuck's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Everyone could die tomorrow, like that kind of thing.
I feel like earlier when we talked about Joyce, we basically summed up what we were talking about with her,
100%,
because of the fact that we got in the beginning of the season, she's still hating on Buffy. Mid-season, they're kind of like being a little bit okay, and then by the end, she's right back almost at square one. But regardless, like, now she knows about Buffy's Slayer responsibilities. So that's going to change a huge dynamic between her and her daughter, her and Giles, her and her daughter's friends, because she's going to obviously learn that her daughter's friends also know about Buffy being the Slayer. So that's a big character development for Joyce that's aside from this trivial stuff that we could like gas up that we've already spoken on. So like, and it's more of a Slayerette prediction without you predicting anything, that says that Joyce is going to be invited into this world right along where everybody else has been, and now she's going to have to learn to navigate the channel pathway of being a parent to a girl that literally is killing the undead or demonic entities, saving the world. Like, without your specific daughter, the world could crumble, because there's these other elements that people look past or don't know of, don't see, you know what I mean? So this can be really like awesome for her. You know, Joyce didn't come through in the end of the season for me, like with her being the way that she was, and we talked about that becoming too just the bad parenting vibes of kicking your kid out and stuff like that. There was an opportunity for Joyce to not do that. So for her, it kind of left me in this limbo stage with her in her development, because I know what comes next, but like right now where I'm sitting with her, I'm like, did she really develop? You know?
Yeah, I agree completely. It's almost like Xander, where we're taking a couple steps forward and a couple of steps back, almost, where she like makes a stride and then doesn't. But overall, and here's just something I don't want to lose sight of in general as a parent. I wouldn't know how I would feel if I was exposed to information that basically translates to the equivalent of I can't protect my child from their destiny and from the consequences of that, and how terrifying that is as a parent. So I want to give her like a little slack, because I
a little
feel
bit of
like
positive vibes.
it just is a lot to wrap your brain around, I think, especially so quickly. Like, there's no like making peace with this overnight or really understanding all the layers of it, because sometimes Buffy goes days without understanding all the fucking full layers of it, So it's like, for the person actually walking through the fire, you can't make someone else be on the sidelines and say, you should be okay with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And you should support what I'm doing, and you should be comfortable with this, especially when that person is your fucking child and the person that you brought into this world to protect. And then you feel like you can't. So that's my take on Joyce.
Joyce clearly was out of weed at the end of the season, and she had forgotten how to keep the positive vibes and positive energy flowing. I'm just saying.
She miscounted her brownies. She thought she had one in the freezer, and she didn't. And it sent her.
Or her high was ruined, and she just got really pissed, and only the negative vibes could be flowing. I love Joyce, though. I can't wait to see her in our future and stuff like that too. But that's Joyce. We can do a little bit for Oz too, because we got introduced to Oz this season, and I know he's low-key one of your favorite attachment characters, just because of the fact that obviously he's an extension of Willow now. I think you'll be excited to kind of see their love, since you can't watch Giles and Jenny anymore. We can't watch Buffy and Angel, so we're gonna be tailing off of them. That's our dynamic between the two right there, all nailed up in one. To me, like, just to say on his development, I think Oz's character brings a unique exploration of control, identity, and the struggle between human nature and animal instinct, which obviously vampires and demons and things like that, that's more of an animal instinct, impulsive thing, whereas human nature is to be caring and considerate and all that stuff. Like, they have their conscious, all of that. And that's a great element to add into the show to help develop other characters and flesh out little small things. Even if he's not doing that in a big way, that's what he represents. So that theme is able to now show up in the show through Oz. And obviously he's a werewolf, so that is still open to be developed, because we haven't touched base. We haven't seen him, have a full moon again since Phases. It's been after that. Like, we did hear about, like, he's been locked up in the cage. Giles says that he can locked up, whatever. So we know that he's taking initiative to, like, keep himself contained at this point whenever he woofs out versus being on the loose and causing problems, and also not being hunted down by potential comebackers,
Yeah.
aka Kane. But just the element of what he did as a character for his dynamic with Willow is a lot of his own character development, because without Willow we wouldn't really have an Oz in the group, because he was there specifically placed for Willow this season to have that relationship with. So they really do go hand in hand. But I think Oz's journey in season 2 has been less about him, because we don't learn too much of Oz. Oz is this moot character that says these very strange, like off the wall, kind of like not crazy things, but
That's
they're
true.
so monotone of like, yeah, I feel like he's actually the stoned one. He buys from Joyce, but like, because he's always so mellow about everything, and he
Either that or
adds
he's
a
he's the
fun, quirky
dealer.
way. Like, no, that's Daryl's mom.
Oh yeah.
But um what was I about to say? As he learns to understand and control that werewolf side, that's the lesson that we get about like self-acceptance and restraint. And he represents the theme of embracing one's inner darkness without losing oneself. And I think that metaphor also carries out, that'll be part of the challenges of adolescence and identity that resonate with the broader themes of the season. So that's something we can expect more for his development, because like I said, you can't touch base on too much. He wasn't in a lot of the season. Like, he was in a
No.
few episodes. He had his one,
Right.
thankfully, Oz-centric episode with Phases. But other than that, we've just like seen him on the sidelines with Willow and making funny little random comments. It hasn't been too crazy.
Yeah. I do like the fact that, like, in any case scenario, he does always seem calm, and there is that kind of like stoner like essence about that where he's just like, yeah, it's chill. But to watch his character of out of everyone become a werewolf and actually physically watch the transition happen in front of Willow was kind of like the highlight of everything that was Oz-centric for me, because it was just so crazy and unhinged and far-fetched, and it took a turn that I wasn't really expecting the show to go in, but especially not take someone like Oz, who's slowly becoming like a fixture in the group,
Yeah.
and make him go through something like that. But I will say, and like you're saying, for his placement for Willow specifically, he brings like a lot of very sweet and grounded energy to Willow's life. And I think that she really almost needed it to bring her something that is more, that has more depth to it, and something she can take seriously and kind of bring about something in her that we haven't seen either. So I think they complement each other really well in a different way than Cordelia and Xander do.
Yeah. Spike and Drusilla, essentially, because they will be a wombo combo. Okay, so there's a lot we can say about Spike, but what immediately stands out is the kind of villain and vampire that he is. He's the first one that we get that's like really brash and cocky and fiercely charismatic. Unlike Angel, where he seems to depict a little bit more cruelty in his actions, Spike brings that wild, unpredictable, yet calculated energy. Because when we first see him, obviously he's like really hunting out the Slayer. He's trying to stalk her and doing all that kind of stuff. And he channels a high, like if he was like on the villain roster, he like gets up there because he's a fresh threat to Buffy's world. From his first appearance, Spike is shown to be a force of nature, violent, impulsive, and unapologetically bold, and has like a swagger and sharp wit, contrasting with like more of like what we get as Angelus later, like who has this like, I don't want to say that, like a sophisticated menace kind of vibe to him, because like he carries this allure to him, whereas Spike's just like gung ho, like I'm just gonna charge in. And I feel like for his development this season, obviously he comes in hot with problems for the gang, and he's like our initial like false big bad for the season. We think Spike and Drusilla are going to be the whole problem for this season, but we obviously learn Angelus is the true big bad, and Spike is a wild card in the beginning part of the season as well. Now he has multiple face-offs with Buffy, and that kind of opens up like who Spike is and how he fights, what he's trying to do to overcome the Slayer. He's having a challenge with this Slayer where he's already killed 2 in the past, and this one seems to be problematic for him. This is the first one that hasn't, like, he just hasn't walked away as the victor from all the fights that he's had leading up to this. So it's frustrating for him, and that adds like to the little precursor stuff we get to later on in the season where he just decides to team up with this bitch. And we also learn that he's brutal and aggressive, like in nature. His relationship with Drusilla adds layers to his character as well, and we learn that side of him where he's protective and deeply loyal to her. even to the end, when all he wants to do is have things between them back the way that they were. Like, that's his big mission, is to get Drusilla back in, part B of the show, because he doesn't like, he even says that, he's like, I don't like the way she acts around him, when he's expressing to Buffy that he doesn't want to be here anymore. He wants to take Drew and get the fuck out. It's a whole thing. And I think that's really fucked up too, because Spike's put on the back burner when Angelus rises, and obviously Drusilla follows all up underneath him. And I'm like, your man was all about you in the beginning of the season and helping you get restored back to your full self. And then you're going to leave him high and dry and go follow up under Angelus because he can't get around right now. But this is like a villainous ass motherfucker. He tops Angelus. Yeah, Angelus did a lot of fucked up shit. But guess who was hanging out with y'all? Darla, Drusilla, and Spike. There wasn't just one really without the others. So for the longest time, like, we know that canonically at this point. I know that's not crazy fleshed out with Spike yet, but like, we know that he's a part of the history with Drusilla and Darla. So they were like a quartet back in the day. So for this to like open up and this be how like his story gets told through this season, him basically being a wimpy person versus like the rest of the lifetime that he's been a vampire, he's been so powerful and in his right, out of his mind, just like obviously he's with Drusilla, he's got to be a little out of his mind, but like he finds a thrill in all of this, and he's put on the back burner this season. So I think it's also interesting too, along his development, we also get like highlights on the larger vampire world beyond Sunnydale, hinting not only with their past, but also the complex politics and rivalries amongst vampires as well. The fact that he doesn't want the world destroyed like Angelus seems to. He wants to be able to have fun in that world, explore his vampiric nature, not take things seriously, kill people, eat people all the time. Like, he wants that to be his life, not the whole world to be in a hell dimension and him having to like size up with demons and all this other, you know what I mean? He wants the life that he has now, and this is what he was like born into. And now all of a sudden Angelus has had this change of heart. So it's very interesting how he puts that flip, like I said, becomes a rival with his fellow vampire and his character development versus following underneath him and helping be a part of the problem. Because he could have got up out that chair and been like, all right, I'm actually okay now, let's go get this bitch all 3-on-1 and we gonna get the Slayer tonight. That could have just been, they could have gotten Buffy, they could have squared up. So I'd love to say that this shifted Spike in a huge way, teaming up with Buffy and all of that and all of the other stuff that goes down. But I feel like it's just small changes. And I feel like he himself is still very selfish. So we sit kind of in a similar place with where we like overall sum up Spike as a person, because he is selfish in nature. He got what he wanted in the end and took Drew out and left town. And then the last time he looks at Buffy, he could have put Drusilla down really quick and went and helped her, but he just shrugs and leaves because he got what he needed, whether Buffy's going to get killed or not. So we still got the same Spike. So his character development is somewhere that kind of just rides a roller coaster that hits waves of up and down and doesn't really like excel high or go low, like in my opinion.
Yeah. But I will say that I almost wanted to stop calling him a villain and more give him like an anti-hero term because of just his charm in a way, but also you can see that there's this really sweet soft spot with Spike because of the fact that you would think that spending time being not just weak and having to heal and being kind of wheelchair bound, but almost turning that somehow into an advantage because you've gotten yourself healed and past the point of needing to be in the chair, but you're still pretending to be, which means that you're doing that so you can keep observing something. You know what I mean? Like you're keeping watch over something. You want to see how something plays out before you give this very useful information away. And so for him to still use all of his charm, wits, energy, even resourcefulness as far as going to team up with Buffy is concerned, all in the name of Drusilla? What?
Yeah.
After, like you just said, she just spent all season basically shitting on your existence and not even being grateful for the fact that you spent all of last season making her the apple of your fucking eye, to the point in which she's now in a better position than you're in, and she's not doing the same for you, and you still want to ride with this bitch into the sunset? What? Like, what's wrong with you? But at the same time, it's like, what's right with you? You know what I mean? Because you have a heart and you have a soft spot and you're not Angelus. Like, we don't see that part of him. So it almost kind of makes you want him around, even if he's a villain,
I love that this is your first take going through, too. So this is going to be so much fun.
So yeah, I think that's where I'm at with Spike. It was refreshing. It was a refreshing character development for him, especially one that you don't often see when it comes to like the villain side of shows like this. So I like that he was even resourceful enough to think about the fact that he should team up with Buffy, and he kind of has to go against the grain of his own nature, you know what I mean? So yeah, it was just fully like, it was great. It was great to see.
All right, well, in Spike, obviously we've touched base on Drusilla, but the only other thing that's left to really say is that she still has podcast names. Not really. I don't know. I didn't write anything really down about her, but you had texted me before this. And you were like, wait, are we supposed to be saying something about Drusilla? Are we skipping her altogether? Like,
I didn't write anything down about Drusilla, I'll be honest.
I'm gonna say this one kind of thing and like keep it short and cute, and then we can finish off with our last portion in person for character development. But Drusilla was my favorite, like one of my favorite villains in the series whenever I used to watch when I was younger. And obviously because I've got a bad taste in my mouth now for her, I don't view it quite the same, because it's a little tainted to watch her and like really root for her whenever like, and I can separate the show a good bit from it, but it's still strange to watch it through and be like, okay, well, you still podcast names, or like you're really insane, like all this other stuff. I used to love her character though, because I loved her psychic abilities. I love the demeanor that she has. So not necessarily like the way she treated Spike, and I noticed that a lot differently this time around. Like we just came off a hot talking him and her in his section, but that also made me dislike her a little bit this season, not just the Juliet portion of, you know, that and Drusilla. So that's developed for me as her as a character. But obviously Drusilla, we don't get a whole lot from her. We learn a little bit about her past. We know that she was tortured by Angelus and that she's a vampire that has visions and all of that, and is with Spike. That's a big portion of her story, that she was wounded at one point, got healed by him. Angel is a big portion of her life, so she followed her right up underneath him the way she like naturally, I guess, would have. But it will be interesting whenever we get to see Drusilla in the future to see like how she comes back and in what ways, to put it that way, because those are sometimes like some of the moments that I really like Drusilla as a character, because she's not the same way that like season 2 was, like I said earlier, and you were like, thank God, like kind of breadcrumbed Courtney and was like, you know, like Drusilla isn't a big theme in the future seasons or anything like that. She's not some like big prominent villain and stuff. She was kind of a season 2 of the time thing, and I feel like that's pretty safe to say, because when we see her, we'll see her. They left town, so for all we know, Spike and Drusilla are gone from the show for forever. But I feel like more than anything, I always appreciate the psychological horror element that Drusilla brings to the show, and in a very unsettling way, because of the fact that she's out of her mind. She's not in her right noggin. So we got to see little bits of her this season, a little bit of her fighting and stuff, but she's the one character that like I just had to throw in here a little bit because of Spike, and because she's so important to like that role and to this season specifically itself. But that's enough about her. Anyways, moving on to our last one. Our last person that we just want to cover in this character development portion of our season 2 wrap up is Kendra, because we can't not do her a little bit of justice, because she's our other Slayer. Kendra arrives mid-season as a stark contrast to Buffy. She's disciplined, serious, and unwaveringly focused on her Slayer duties. Summoned after Buffy's temporary death in season 1, Kendra represents what Buffy might have been if she had fully embraced the Slayer role without her personal struggles and doubts within Buffy's experiences, and obviously all the normalcy, all the other stuff that she goes through. Kendra's present challenges Buffy across her development, because we don't get much from Kendra. She's in 3 episodes, you know what I mean? Technically 2, because she arrives as the Slayer in our eyes at the very end of part 1 of that episode. So technically she's been 2 episodes, this poor bitch. But she helps Buffy to examine her own commitment and responsibilities. So fleshed out, she's like Buffy's true shadow self in a way, where Cordelia is that normal version of her shadow self, and Kendra represents the Slayer shadow of her, like what she could be or what she should be or what she should try to be, all of that. And it helps grant Buffy a whole new experience and perspective on her Slayer legacy and what it means to carry that burden. Because between the two of them, like her rigid approach to Buffy's different perspective, it just brings a whole lot of tension between the two of them, and they kind of have to butt heads for a while before they actually become friends, which I really like that journey too, because Kendra and her development, she learns, and hindsight from Buffy that she doesn't have to feel so alone, that there are others that can help, and it might not be a bad idea to make a couple of friends that you can, even if it's like a guy that helps make you steaks or weapons or something, you know what I mean, another person that you can go interact with that necessarily doesn't have fight in the battle, because at the end of the day the Slayer only needs herself technically. But that's also seems to be why they all die in the past, because they only got them. They have a watcher that's instructing them to go out and do these things. There's this thing happening, like, go take care of it, there's a very dark power about to rise here, you know, that kind of shit. Like, that's what Kendra is. But she learned so much from Buffy, and I feel like though her time is brief on the show, her character emphasizes those themes of duty, identity, and the loneliness of the Slayer's path. Her tragic fate, killed by Drusilla, underscores the danger that Buffy faces and the high cost of the fight against evil, just as much as kind of Jenny does in a way, because we also lose somebody else that's of a higher level of importance. We just didn't get a chance to really know her. And Kendra's introduction expands the Slayer mythology, hinting at the larger world of chosen warriors and the consequences of their work beyond Sunnydale. Because obviously we learned that, like, with there being another Slayer activated, now we're going to have another one, and they're going to have a watcher, and there's this other element on the show. It's not just Buffy and Giles anymore. There's always going to be this like heavy contrast, even if the next Slayer dies and the next one dies, and there's like every season there's another Slayer, because something that's not necessarily what happens, but you get what I mean. Like, it changes the whole mythos of like the Watchers Council, who they are, how they work, how they operate, and what Slayers are supposed to be, and that there's this other scheme now also working outside of Sunnydale with Slayers and Watchers on the outside, if that makes sense, like without spoiling anything or giving breadcrumbs. Like, you know, because that's not a spoiler, because we know careful. Another Slayer, this one died, another one's going to rise. We've already talked about that.
Yes.
So we know that's coming, but it changes a lot. So that's like what her character development helps to open up for the rest of the show in that way, just having had her.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you said it best. She came in as such a contrast to Buffy, and being this more disciplined and emotionally detached Slayer almost, you know? So it was like seeing what Buffy could be or could have turned into if she didn't also have this need to live a normal teenage life. But it does make you wonder a lot about how are Kendra's parents so exposed to her duty in advance to make the choice for her, almost to make this be her life, whereas that doesn't seem like the case obviously for Buffy. Joyce didn't know, she just found out. So it's like for Buffy it's like you can see why they're so different and why one has been put in the position to make this their life, because they have had the opportunity to do so. They don't get distracted with the even exposure or temptation of a normal life, whereas Buffy has to balance both somehow.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that's important to acknowledge, because then you see Kendra start to evolve into a more neutral space as a Slayer. You know what I mean? And she becomes... not that she becomes any less like disciplined or anything, but she kind of learns that there's more than just this one way to do it.
Yeah.
Because of how Buffy's doing it. So that's also a big kind of jolt in a different direction for her character, where you see her kind of loosen up a little bit and let her hair down and still be able to manage to do her duty as the Slayer and still take it just as seriously while not being so uptight, I guess, about it.
Yeah. Well, everyone, that wraps up our character development. I hope you enjoyed our discussion on it and the people that we chose to really give it to, because those are our main cast members, our people that were pivotal roles, I feel like, on the show. If you feel like we missed anybody, or if you want to express anything to us, let us know. Send us a DM or an email, and we can have some further discussion there. Obviously, as I will be making this a thing, this is a separate episode from our original season 2 wrap up. It's just an extension on the character development section. So I had no real big way to close this out, but I think we did it pretty good justice on character development and like talking about our thoughts, like kind of going through the season. That helps us kind of walk through and rediscuss the themes and the metaphors and the placement of each character and the pivotal role that they played along this journey, and specifically for season 2's journey as well. So either way, I'm going to seal it off there, and we'll catch you guys next season.
Hopefully. No, I'm just kidding.